Serious people of AskReddit, what is your scariest encounter with the paranormal, aliens, cryptids, and or other unexplainable phenomena? This is a little convoluted, and I will try my best to make it clear. I have never told anyone the paranormal part, as I feel no one would believe me. My father and his brother Gary were lifelong dairy farmers in Wisconsin. We lived less than 2 miles apart. When needed we would trade help and labor on harvest and planting jobs that demanded it. Many times dad would send me, saying, "You have to go and help at Gary's." Eventually, I took over our farm and cousin Mike took over from his father Gary. Gary passed away 12 years ago, and Gary's widow eventually met a nice man and moved in with him. They are both in their late 70s now. Mike moved back into the farmhouse. Mike sold the dairy herd after Gary died and got a 9-to-5 job. I rent his land. My dad passed away over 6 years ago after me taking care of him for 18 years. He lived in this house his whole life. I sold my dairy herd soon after. About a year after dad passed away, on an October night, Mike started a fire in the wood furnace in the basement and went to bed. His sister had just gotten out of a bad relationship and was living there till she got home from her job about midnight and added some wood to the furnace and went to bed as well. The story I told everyone when this happened was this: I was coming home from looking at equipment for sale across the state. I stopped in a nearby city to see a late movie, then hit a bar for a few soft drinks, then had a meal at a 24-hour restaurant. On the way home about 3 AM, I passed by Mike's place and saw fire coming out the chimney and smoke coming out from the basement door. I dialed 911 with the location and ran into the house yelling for them to get up. There was minimal smoke in the upstairs. Mike and I went downstairs with a fire extinguisher and found an area about 3 feet square at the base of the chimney where the floor joists were burning. We put it out with the extinguisher and some water. The fire department arrived and put out the chimney fire. No real smoke damage upstairs and minimal repairs to the house, but a few more minutes and the fire would have burned up into the kitchen. The truth of what happened was this: I had gotten home about 10:30 and went to bed. Now some of this I'm not clear on. I'm not sure if I dreamed it or if it was some sort of apparition. Close to 3 AM, dad opened the door to my room and turned on the light and said, "Get up, you have go help at Gary's." I remember saying, "In the morning." He said, in his most authoritative voice, "No, right now." I sat bolt upright in bed. My room door was open and the hallway light was on. I tried to dismiss it as imagination, but I knew I had turned off that light and shut my door. I realized with the adrenaline rush and my lingering doubts, I would not get back to sleep, so for my peace of mind I decided to get dressed and drive over to check on Mike's place. That's when I spotted the chimney fire. Like I said, I never told anyone this because I fear no one would believe me. I heard my voice whispered in my ear. It was like 2 AM and terrifying. I suddenly felt just a heavy malicious presence that I had to hide before like a half an hour before I got the courage up to run to my room. I was on the computer downstairs. Eventually, like a week later, I convinced myself I had just been hearing things. Then it happened again. The same thing. A male voice inches from my left ear. It didn't happen again after that, and I once more forced myself to think I made it up. While I believe in paranormal, I would prefer to not have that happen. Thank you very much. Until about a year later, when I casually mentioned it to my mother, and she told me she also heard a male voice whispering my name downstairs. Don't live in that house anymore, and while I miss the house itself, I do not miss whatever the hell that was. Swear I had the same thing happen to me repeatedly throughout my life, 15 plus times. I've convinced myself that it's something that just happens sometimes. Most often happens when I'm falling asleep, which is a bummer because I don't fall asleep for a long time after, as I'm immediately at a 10 alertness. Sometimes I tell myself I'm attributing a human voice / sound to a random sound, but there's been at least 2 occasions where it happened in perfect silence and was startlingly clear. I don't get the malicious feeling. No feeling really, just a sudden spike in adrenaline. It's mostly my name. Once was thanks and once was help. I don't believe in ghosts, likely some kind of auditory hallucination. Not that that should make you feel better. This did not happen to me, it happened to my mom. She always got spooked by ghosts and other stuff like that. When she was a kid she lived with her mom. It was a pretty screwed up household. One night she was sleeping next to her mom and something grabbed her off the bed and brought her under the bed. As you can imagine, it was very scary. She couldn't move and had to stay there all night without anyone to help. I'm not sure how the day after that played out, but she was constantly getting hauntings like this. She never wants to watch scary movies like The Conjuring and other movies that fit that same category because of her bad experiences. I was sleeping in one morning and was kind of half asleep. You know how, when you've technically gotten enough sleep, but you want more, and your brain is like nah. It was like that, but I was mostly still asleep. I was just kind of laying there when I heard an ominous female voice yell at me to wake up. Whatever that thing was followed it with an ear-splitting scream that about made me shit the bed. To be honest, I regularly see paranormal stuff and it usually doesn't bother me, but that scared me half to death. In the middle of the night I woke up. No idea how late it was though. I sleep viewing my door, and it was opening slowly. The light in the hallway was clearly on, but in the door there was a tall figure with bright yellow eyes. He just looked at me. Nothing like any of my family members, but quite human. He closed the door and I immediately fell asleep. That was creepy cause I don't usually fall asleep that fast. When I was about 10 or so I was looking out my mom's bedroom window while she watched TV. It was something I did often. It was a large window with no screen, just glass. From it I could see our backyard, the trees in my next door neighbor's house, and then a clear large area of the sky. This one evening I was looking at an object that appeared to be up in the sky, I would say about the same altitude as maybe a commercial airplane. All I could make out was 3 distant flashing lights, and the object was completely stationary unlike a plane or a helicopter. They blinked steadily, flashing red and blue in succession. I watched for over 20 minutes and even called my mom over to look at it. She slowly and disinterestedly got up and walked over and looked at it for a few minutes and just said it was weird before she went back to watching TV. As time went on the lights started blinking faster and faster until finally whatever it was darted insanely quickly to the right, then left, then right in a zigzag pattern before shooting off out of my view from the window. I audibly yelled and tried to open the window to stick my head out and look. I yelled to my mom what happened, and she looked out the window again, but by then it was long gone. That was like 20 years ago, and I still have no explanation for what happened. I'm a 100% logical person who has the nerve to scoff at my sister who swears up and down that she's seen and been touched by ghosts. I still occasionally have nightmares about the flashing lights I saw in the sky that night. I remember I used to live in this 100+ year old house, and the basement smelled like sulfur and something rotting. One night, or morning, I guess, it was 3:15 AM, and I heard the doorknob moving up and down, like someone was trying to come in my room. Me, being half awake, went and opened the door to see no one there. I shut it back and went back to my bed. As soon as I was in my bed, I heard something scratching at the foot of my bed. I covered myself with the blankets and tried to ignore it. My lamp on my bedside table launched across the room and shattered everywhere. And then I remember passing out after that. I woke up the next morning to everything being back the way it was, but my mom had a weird dream that I was eaten by a demon. I've never spoken about this or typed, so this may sound all fucked up, but here goes. I was 5 or 6 and staying at my dad's farm in northern Circa, roughly 6 acres, and surrounded by a lot of nothing. It was a hot summer day, and I was just standing in the yard out by one of the barns near the edge of the woods. I had been running around playing, and was now just killing time, holding a garden hose and just spraying in the air/ground, etc. I was sort of daydreaming, and started spraying the dirt a few feet away, and began to sort of dig a hole with the stream. The water would push the wet soil away, the hole would fill with dirty water, I'd blast it back out again. I was doing this over and over, making the hole deeper and deeper. Eventually, have no idea how long, but a while, I had sprayed a hole a few feet deep, and I just kept spraying deeper, wider. Suddenly all of the water/mud just fell away. like the bottom was quickly removed. Picture a toilet flushing but very fast, leaving a dark hole about a foot or so across. Suddenly something slapped up against the opening, filling the hole completely. I heard it smack against the wet mud. It was wet and pink like flesh, but had no discernible markings or identifying features. Picture a hole in a sheet with someone's cheek pressed to the other side, but huge. The flesh was flexing somewhat, like what your elbow looks like when you bend it, if an elbow was 2 feet wide. I stood there literally paralyzed. I couldn't move a muscle. I'm not sure if it was shock, but I wasn't scared so much as stunned. I remember thinking, if that's its elbow, or shoulder or something, then it has to be gigantic. Suddenly, quick as it appeared, it slipped away. Whole thing lasted maybe a minute. Water filled the hole again. I set down the hose and walked back to the main house, then never spoke of it. Hell, I didn't even remember it until I was in my 30s. No idea what it was to this day. FTR, I'm not a believer in anything supernatural, spiritual, etc. Pretty late, I always miss these, but here goes. I lived in an apartment complex for 7 years and experienced a whole lot of weird stuff, many with witnesses. But the most unnerving was this. I was laying in bed just getting comfy. I was rolled onto my side facing the wall when I felt someone sit on the bed behind me. I thought maybe my mom came in, and I turned to look, but there was no one. I could still feel the dip in the bed. The door was closed, the light was off. I was totally alone. I was freaked out, so I rolled back over and stared at the wall, trying to get the courage to reach over and turn the lamp on. Well, suddenly I feel whatever was sitting there lay down and put an arm around me. I felt the pressure of an arm on my side. I felt the dip of weight behind me. I was too scared to move at that point, since I didn't want to turn around and see what was there. Eventually I fell asleep. Nothing stranger than usual in the morning. Late to the party, so we'll get buried, but I have a couple of experiences my dad told me about his childhood home growing up. He grew up in a pretty basic house on a small estate in the south of England. No fancy Victorian or Edwardian type thing with loads of history, just a run-of-the-mill prefabricated brick house like every other house built in post-World War II England. Anyway, he told me of a story when he was about 8/9 and laying in bed one night not long after turning his lamp out to go to bed. He's laying there like any other night trying to doze off when he hears a noise beneath his bed directly under where his head is on his pillow. Whatever was making the noise then proceeds to travel down the length of his bed to where his feet are, when all of a sudden the animated head of an elderly woman pops up at the footboard of his bed. No body, arms or legs, just the glowing face/head of this elderly woman. As he stares at her in shock, she screws her face up at him and he calls out for his mum or dad, he can't remember who. As he does this, the elderly woman begins to mimic him in a childish/baby-like voice. In my dad's words, he literally pissed the bed in fear. He said as mine and come bursting into the room, the woman's head disappeared as quickly as it appears. But he swore mine and caught a glimpse of the elderly woman's head floating there as she entered the room. As he remembers it, she let out a gasp and had her eyes locked at the footboard of my dad's bed as she'd come through his bedroom door. She denied having seen anything and put it down to my dad's overactive imagination and watching too much Star Trek. But I can tell by the way he tells the story and how vivid he says it all was, down to him pissing his bed with pure fear, that he saw something evil at the foot of his bed that night.